This week, but the free agency negotiation window officially opens Monday. Today, a ton of news and conversation coming your way about where the biggest names will end up and which teams will be involved. We begin with breaking news from Adam Schefter. Adam, the Raiders released quarterback Geno Smith.
1 year ago, they traded for Geno Smith to be their quarterback of the future, and now they are moving on from Geno Smith. They free up $8 million in salary cap space. There'll be a dead cap charge of $18.5 million that the Raiders are in strong position to absorb. And Geno Smith, barring a trade, an unexpected trade in the next week, will join the free agent pool of quarterbacks that now is expected to include Kyler Murray and quite possibly Tua Tagovailoa. Let's take a look at some of these quarterbacks who could be available, will be available here in the next week. Geno Smith, Kyler Murray, Malik Willis, Kirk Cousins, who will be released next week. And, of course, the draft with Fernando Mendoza and Ty Simpson. That will be of high interest to teams in the quarterback market, like the New York Jets, like the Arizona Cardinals, like the Miami Dolphins, like the New York Jets. All these teams out there vying for quarterbacks. We'll see how the quarterbacks shake out here in the next week to come. But Geno Smith will have some interest out there, a former Pro Bowl quarterback, and now he will be a free agent.
You wondered if they would keep Geno Smith there to make sure they had somebody in place if they didn't feel like they could protect Fernando Mendoza, the presumed #1 overall pick. That's not what they do. Lots to dive in here for the hour. Kevin Clark, Jeremy Fowler, Tim Hasselbeck here with Adam, of course. And Kevin, I'll start with you. You heard some of the destinations there that are quarterback-needy teams. Where do you think makes sense for Geno Smith?
Yeah, good news and bad news for Geno Smith. The good news is you can explain some of this away last year with the fact that it was a hopeless situation, okay? The bad news is the destinations you can go to, also hopeless situations. The New York Jets, where your mission, if you choose to accept it, is frankly job preservation. And in Miami, might be to get Arch Manning. That might be your job if you become the quarterback there. So he was by far the most sacked quarterback in football last year. He had a run game. It was stuffed at the line far more than anybody else in football. So this was a tough situation for Geno Smith. I think in a different system with different coaches and different talent around him, he could have had a good year last year. That just wasn't in the cards. He didn't play well. He made mistakes. He is going to be on the second or even third tier of available quarterbacks. You're looking at Jets or Dolphins at best if he wants to start.
Yeah. Geno Smith believes that he's going into a better situation now. He was unhappy last year with the way things went in the offensive line. Now he looks at a preferred destination like Minnesota. The Vikings are in a beautiful spot. They can sit back. They have these quarterbacks that are essentially free because they're getting all these guaranteed money by the teams that have cut them, whether it's Tua, Geno, Kyler Murray. These quarterbacks will be intrigued by playing there potentially. They can sit back and take one on the cheap for a team that's already in salary cap problems. So Geno is looking at Minnesota. Miami, I'm told he's intrigued by if they don't sign Malik Willis. And then is there a reunion with the Jets? I would say whatever the musical chairs are, the Jets are probably getting the last chair.
Yeah, Adam mentioned the Jets twice when he was talking about the quarterback-needy teams, and I think that probably speaks to just how needy they are. Tim, maybe an expected move by Vegas to move on from Geno, but now it does set up for expected #1 pick Fernando Mendoza to start day one. Is this the right move if and when he becomes a Raider?
I think it probably is. Look, there'll be another quarterback or two on that roster in Las Vegas. And, you know, there's always a chance that if they really don't feel like Mendoza is ready, that they can play somebody else at the beginning of the year. But I firmly believe it's easier to get better playing than it is watching someone play. And, you know, every organization can have their different philosophy on it. You know, and I think there, you know, are some people that believe there have been a few instances in the NFL where guys kind of been thrown out there too early in a bad situation. But again, I would still maintain if you drafted the right guy with the right, you know, physical ability, but then most importantly, the mental toughness and resolve, that weathering the storm and learning on the job is the better path to success than watching somebody else do it. So I don't think that this is anything that really changes or alters the plans in any way for Las Vegas with Mendoza, you know, presumably starting opening day.
Yeah, Tim is dead on. The way that practice rules are and training camp rules are, there aren't a lot of reps to go around. So if you take a guy first overall, you have to give him all the reps possible in July and August getting ready for the season. There is no value in spending September and saying that, oh, Andy Dalton's going to be our starter. Any of these guys you signed for $8 or $9 million. That is completely worthless in today's game. Mendoza, for me, needs to grow into that role. He knows where the ball should go. He has a high football IQ, but he needs to sort of clock the NFL speed, sense pressure on the backside, that kind of stuff. You can only learn that by playing, get him out there.
Let's also be clear here that the Raiders are going to bring in another veteran at some point in time. And in a perfect world, they'd like that veteran to get a lot of the reps and even potentially be the opening day starter in 2026. But we've heard a lot of teams talk about how they're going to bring along a first-round draft pick, especially a number 1 overall pick slowly. And, of course, then more often than not, that number 1 overall pick winds up starting on opening day. So there's still a lot that has to unfold from a quarterback standpoint in Las Vegas. But the one thing we do know is Geno Smith will not be there. And we do expect that Fernando Mendoza will be there. But they are going to bring in somebody else to challenge him. And again, I mentioned Geno Smith a year ago. How about the Seattle Seahawks? They move off Geno Smith. They trade him. They bring in Sam Darnold. They become the Super Bowl champions. And things change quick in the NFL.
That's a good point. I mean, Adam, if only the Raiders had somebody on their roster who they could trade away to get a massive haul back to help support Fernando Mendoza. I think his name is Maxx Crosby. What are the inklings about potentially trading away Crosby as of today?
Well, here's where we are today, Laura. I think that there have been teams waiting and wondering if the Raiders would move Maxx Crosby. There are any number of teams lined up, ready to make an offer, who have made offers for Maxx Crosby, but the Raiders are not in any rush to get something done, at least as of now. Could that change on Monday when the legal tampering period opens? Sure. Could it change this weekend? Sure. It could change any time. But there have been teams that have been putting forth offers, and the Raiders have been very patient. They insist that they're not going to do something unless they get the price that they want, whether it's from Chicago or Dallas or Baltimore. What I think is interesting here, everybody's wondering if there'll be an A.J. Brown trade. Well, if there does happen to be an A.J. Brown trade, that then could free up money and give the Eagles added draft pick compensation to where maybe they could be a player for Maxx Crosby. There is still a lot that's going to unfold here in the days to come, and these situations can change rather quickly. Just when you think you might have a situation figured out, they sometimes make sharp turns and go in way different directions than people expect. And so, again, the Raiders are slow playing this. Everybody wants an answer. Everybody's waiting for an answer. The Raiders are in no rush, have been in no rush, to get a Maxx Crosby deal done. It doesn't mean they will. There still is a feeling that they possibly will. But again, nothing close or imminent at this time.
Okay, wait a second, Adam, because I know you pretty well. You bring up A.J. Brown and that timeline. There's something. So what's
going on in Philadelphia?
What's the deal there? A.J. Brown, let's say that timeline somehow gets going a little faster, and then they've got the capital to potentially go get Maxx Crosby. What's going on?
Well, again, a lot of these situations depend on one another. And I think there has been a school of thought all along that the Eagles would keep A.J. Brown. But it seems like those trade winds just keep blowing. And they haven't quieted down. And so it's certainly possible here that before the new league year begins that the Eagles could deal A.J. Brown. It doesn't mean they will, Laura. It doesn't mean they will. We've gone back and forth on this a few times. But let's just operate in a world in which the Eagles do move A.J. Brown. If that does happen, all of a sudden, the Eagles have added draft capital. They have added flexibility. So if that happens, as creative and as thoughtful as the Eagles have been, all of a sudden they certainly could be a player in the Maxx Crosby sweepstakes. It doesn't mean they will. We're just going through all the machinations and possibilities, and that's certainly within the realm of options that's out there at this time. There's a lot of things that could happen. There's a lot of things we're all waiting to happen. But it certainly feels like the A.J. Brown trade talk, if anything, seems to be picking up rather than dying down. And we'll see, of course, how that unfolds here in the days to come.
I love these machinations. Thank you, Adam, for all of that. We're going to stew on that here. Kevin, as you hear that, and maybe as A.J. Brown could relate to all of this, specifically, do you think now is the time for the Raiders to move on from Maxx Crosby?
Yeah, I went back and forth on this in the last couple of months, and I've come to the conclusion that the Maxx Crosby era in Vegas has run its course. He had the highest double-team rate of his career last year, over 30%. He had his lowest pressure rate because of that, because offenses are able to key in on him because there's not a lot of talent there in Vegas. They're not going to win a lot this year, maybe even the next few years. I just think he deserves to play on Sunday Night Football. Huge games for a contender. Get some trade value now, sell high.
Look, I would agree. I think the time is now as well. When you look at, where the Raiders are, they're rebuilding. They're picking number one in the draft, and they're going to take a quarterback. And I think that, there's sometimes a feeling that, you be careful. Like, you're going to draft a quarterback. Looks like he's going to play right away. How bad is the team that he's going to? Do you want to throw him into that situation? And I think it's fair to look at a couple of situations. Like, Caleb Williams was drafted. They weren't very good his rookie year, albeit that roster probably better than most for a number one pick. Drake May was drafted in the first round, pretty high in the first round. He went to kind of what a lot of people would say was, a pretty deficient team in terms of talent across the board on both sides of the ball his rookie year. Well, both of those quarterbacks were able to kind of get guys around him, over a year's time, improve that football team, and the teams and the quarterbacks made huge strides. So I do think that when you're looking at, where the Raiders are, they're not close. And so look, moving Crosby, building for the future around your young quarterback just seems like from a team building perspective, an eye towards the future, it just makes the most sense.
Yeah, Tim, here's what teams are wrestling with right now. Maxx Crosby, the Raiders want a premier package for him. He's a premier player. This is not a salary dump. This is a top 5 to 6 edge rusher. They need serious draft capital to make this trade happen. Well, teams want to be in on this. I know Dallas, for one, is definitely in on this, but can they get to the point where the Raiders are comfortable? Is that 2 first-round picks and a player? Like, will teams go that far when he's 28 years old? Micah Parsons, when that trade got done, he was 24 years old. So a little bit of a different situation. I love that Adam brought up the Eagles because I feel like they have 6 different balls in the air right now. They're trying to re-sign Jalen Phillips, but he might hit free agency. So do they pivot to a Maxx Crosby? Jonathan Grenard with Minnesota. I believe they've kicked the tires on that situation. And then they got Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter in the inside of the defensive line that they would like to re-sign. So it feels like something's going to happen with Philadelphia that doesn't even include A.J. Brown right now.
Insiders just throwing the tea leaves out there for us. I love this.
Yeah, we'll continue to keep that going here. Don't go anywhere here on NFL Live. We've got it all for you. Let's get to some more top stories. Tons of news flying around the NFL, right? Adam, let's start with the latest on Cam Curl.
Well, the Los Angeles Rams have had a busy week, especially in their defensive secondary, trading for Trent McDuffie and now signing free agent to be safety Cam Curl to a 3-year, $36 million deal that includes $24 million guaranteed. He made a lot of big plays for the Rams last season, and he now will stay in Los Angeles and continue to try to make big plays. Meanwhile, the Detroit Lions asked Taylor Decker to rework his contract, take a lower salary. He declined, rejected their advances, and today they announced that he's being released. And this essentially came when he refused to renegotiate his contract. So Taylor Decker becomes a free agent, and there is a team in that division that does need a left tackle in Chicago. And earlier today, quite a confusing situation. Rashawn Gary allegedly posted on Instagram a goodbye to Green Bay. He later said his account was hacked, and that wasn't him. He deleted the post. The Packers, meanwhile, say that they have not taken any action with Rashawn Gary and that all options remain on the table, including a potential release. So it was a very 2026 social media-driven story where there was an announcement that allegedly was a hack that was deleted, but yet there's noise out there that Rashawn Gary could be had and might not be in Green Bay. Somebody said goodbye. Somebody used his image. Somebody came up with a very thoughtful message. but apparently he was just hacked.
Hackers.
Just hacked here. And now we'll wait to see how that Rashawn Gary situation plays itself out over the course of the next week.
Anytime people are talking about a hack, I just always feel like it's not ever a hack. So I don't know.
Very thoughtful hackers. Good with graphics.
I'm going to put in a press release and just slide it into this account.
I was hacked. Okay.
Yeah.
We're just getting started on NFL Live. In the Raiders, you shot out a text to some of your sources. What did you get back?
Yeah, funny tidbit. I asked somebody with the Raiders for a Maxx Crosby update. They said, well, I just saw him in the lunchroom, so I don't think a deal is going down right now. It's his weird existence where he's like training there every day, eating there and working out. He's not really requesting a trade, but he knows it's possible. And so that's the song and dance right now.
It's a good inside look at what it's like, right? That lunchroom at the Raiders facility, awesome. Okay, new on NFL Live, some more news to get to. Running back news out of Houston. Adam, what can you tell us?
Well, first I wanted to find out from Jeremy what's on the lunch menu. Is it grilled cheese and potato soup or what? As for the Houston Texans, Joe Mixon did request his release on Thursday and was granted it today. His time in Houston is over. People expected this to happen once the Texans traded for David Montgomery. Joe Mixon battling that mysterious foot and ankle injury last year that prevented him from playing all year. Now he moves on from Houston. Meanwhile, the Texans also guaranteed money in Danielle Hunter's deal. A lot of extra money for Danielle Hunter, about $40 million extension for the 2027 season, all guaranteed up there. He's been one of the more productive pass rushers, and he gets paid like it as well. And take a look at all the moves that the Texans made this week, extending Danielle Hunter, extending Trent Brown on a one-year deal, acquiring David Montgomery, trading Titus Howard to the Cleveland Browns, and they're not done just yet. They'll have more major moves ahead, and maybe the next major move for the Houston Texans, and I don't think it's too early to put it on the bottom line right now. The Houston Texans are expected to sign Will Anderson to a huge new deal. I would think that would happen here at some point in the coming weeks, but that deal with Will Anderson and the Texans will get done, we think, and he will be tied to Houston. They're not going to let one of the best players in all of football leave. They want him there for a long time, and their intent is to keep him there for a long time with a new deal on the horizon.
So well-deserved. Hold on to that guy, right? The Texans, Tim, I mean, they've been making moves. We had a whole graphic there filled up of all the moves, but have they done enough to help C.J. Stroud and the offense? Because that's been the real issue.
Well, I think Montgomery is going to be a lot of help. He's a very good back. It's why they, you think about all the free agent running backs about to hit the market. They obviously, felt good about him to make a trade to acquire David Montgomery. And that, I do think they need to do other things up front. You just look at the investments, when you look at like the Houston Texans, how they're built. Got a bunch of guys that entered into the league as first-round draft picks on the defensive line. You don't have any on the offensive line. And I just think that, when you do that over time, when you aren't, drafting and developing guys that you draft extremely high, then it can come back to get you if you're not, continuing to try to find, avenues to build your offensive line. He's not a guy that moves around extremely well, and so I do think that, when you look at ways they can help him, it's certainly investing in the front on the offensive side of the ball.
Tim makes 100% great points, and so I'm just going to repeat what he said, but louder, and talk with my hands while doing it. No, the offensive line is a problem. It is the problem. It's the fatal flaw. It's the reason they have a Super Bowl caliber defense, but there is no chance that they win the AFC as presently constructed. C.J. Stroud has not taken the jumps we thought he would, and part of that is bad luck. You need receiving help and receiving health in order to do that, but also it's the offensive line and it's the running game. I don't think David Montgomery is going to appreciably change this offense unless they get a rabbit out of a hat in free agency or in the draft. It's really hard to shop on the bargain bin, in free agency with offensive line help. They do not become available, and if they do, it is expensive. I don't see this offense taking a leap. It's going to be more of the same division round type of losses unless some miracle happens on the O-line.
Man, I mean, it feels like, too, the last two seasons, they've just been kind of shipping these O-linemen away, trying to find that right mix for C.J. Stroud.
Different does not mean better, and they thought that maybe every year different meant better. It doesn't.
Different OC. I mean, there's so many different things they're trying to do for Stroud. They've got to figure it out because I still believe the talent is there. Okay.
Sent him to the Buffalo Bills yesterday, Laura, in return for a second-round draft pick shipped off DJ Moore and a fifth-round pick. The Bears felt like they could make that move with Rome Odunze, Luther Burden, Colston Loveland, Cole Kmet. They felt like Caleb Williams had the weapons he needed, and Buffalo really wanted DJ Moore. The two sides get the deal done. Then last night, the Chicago Bears cleared out $15 million of cap space by moving on from Tremaine Edmonds. It's a big move for a productive linebacker who has 900 tackles on his NFL resume. He now will become a free agent, leaving Chicago. The Bears will have a need at the linebacker position, but they felt like with the savings of $15 million, the move made sense at this point in time.
All right, we'll keep an eye on that for sure. And you talk about some of that money that they freed up. Here's exactly how much more money Chicago has to spend. Between Edmonds' release, the DJ Moore trade, Drew Dahlman's retirement, you're looking at about $44 million in additional cap space ahead of free agency next week. So, Kevin, you like all the moves that the Bears have been making, and along those lines, what else should they be doing?
Yeah, Drew Dahlman's retirement is a big hit, okay?
Yeah.
But as far as what Ryan Poles can control, it's A++ that last week. To take advantage of a desperate team in Buffalo and get that kind of return for DJ Moore is really cool. And now they've got a lot of money to play with. Obviously, they're going to need pass rush. I want to see a big swing with the assets that they have with the cap space. Maybe you're in the Maxx Crosby sweepstakes now. Maybe you're in Trey Hendrickson territory because you've got that kind of money. So I think that you're talking about Ben Johnson, year 2, Caleb Williams, year 3. They're going to have the roster ready to compete for an NFC championship because of what Ryan Poles is doing this week.
Listen, Kevin and I are kind of sharing a brain on the show today.
There we go.
I mean, the trade makes a ton of sense. I mean, look, when you look at DJ Moore, he basically, was, I think staring at a diminishing role, in Chicago when you look at the young receivers that they have, and maybe you throw in Colston Loveland, the pass catchers, I guess you could say, that they have in Chicago, that, they really didn't need him. They had younger, more productive, less expensive options. And so to trade him and get a second-round pick for him is pretty good because you got Rome Odunze, you got Luther Burden, you got Loveland, and so you have all that. Now, I do think the investment turns to the defensive side of the ball. So certainly, like everybody else in the NFL, are going to be linked to Maxx Crosby. But Hendrickson, also another guy that I think that when you talk about the impact that he could have, other than last year where he was kind of banged up and had a bad year, look at like the previous 7 years. Like has been as good as any edge player the NFL has seen over that stretch. And, you might be able to get him at a much reduced rate because of his age and the year he's coming off of. So I think Chicago finds himself in a pretty good situation.
Yeah, Jeremy, with all that created cap space, is there a big splash? You're hearing some names thrown around. Crosby, obviously, Trey Hendrickson. The Bears, are they preparing to make one of these big splash type deals?
They're preparing to make a splash, but it might be more of like a toddler splash, like a relatively small splash. They'll look into a big splash. I do believe they've kicked the tires on the Maxx Crosby situation, but that might be a little bit rich for them. They'll get help on the defensive line at some point, whether it's via trade or free agency. Look, Dennis Allen, the defensive coordinator, has familiarity with Trey Hendrickson from his New Orleans days, and Alex Anzalone, the linebacker who was in Detroit, so they could add to their front 7 there. They need a cornerback. They need to try to re-sign Kevin Byard. I do believe there's a chance that happens. So they could spread the wealth a little bit. In the center, they're going to get a center at some point as well, either in the draft or free agency. So it's going to be a mix of a lot of things.
You mentioned the need for pass rush. Last year, they were historically good at creating turnovers without pressure. If they get the pressure, that's when you're talking about conference championship type stuff.
Yeah, some of the time just taking the ball away comes down to luck. You have to do
and
something.
Catching the ball.
Exactly.
Catching the ball.
He did that a few times in a good way. All right, Adam, another star player whose name has been tossed into trade talks is wide receiver A.J. Brown. You brought this up earlier in our show. What's the latest on his status in Philly?
Listen, Laura, there's a lot of talk right now about A.J. Brown and Maxx Crosby, and I think the two star players are in similar situations. Two teams that would rather not move them, two teams that would rather hold on to them, but two teams that are getting calls and offers from other teams. It has felt for a while like Philadelphia wouldn't move off A.J. Brown. Now it just feels like those trade wins don't quiet down any. And if anything, it almost feels like the chatter across the league has gained some speed and picked up some. So if Philadelphia were going to make a move, it would want to do it, you would think, before the tampering period began, so they would be able to go after certain replacements and have the draft capital that they know they would have in any A.J. Brown particular trade. I think when you look at the landscape of teams that are out there, Buffalo would have figured for A.J. Brown. Buffalo's out. It got DJ Moore. New England still has not landed a big-name wide receiver. Most people expect that they'll land one of those, certainly having moved off of Stephon Diggs this past week. I still think New England is in play there and would be a logical destination. And obviously, there are a lot of teams out there that would love to have A.J. Brown, and it just feels like that talk hasn't quieted down any and is not going away anytime soon.
Yeah, Adam, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but earlier in the show, you said the talk's heating up around A.J. Brown. So continuing to keep an eye on that here over the next couple days and into Monday. We'll have you covered for all of it right here on ESPN. You heard some of the names there, or at least one team mentioned, Tim, that the A.J. Brown trade could involve would be the Patriots, which is fascinating to think about that team, Drake May having a target like that. Is this something the Eagles should be doing, though, trading away A.J. Brown?
There's obviously something going on that they feel like they should, because when you look at the situation, it's not talent based. It's probably more personality, culture, environment, based in terms of his behavior. I don't want to characterize his behavior as something, that is wildly detrimental, but I think that it's at least been a distraction, and it's at least been something that's had to be managed. And we see this from time to time throughout the league, where there'll be an incredibly talented player playing at a high level, but because of the maintenance that they require, the team is just like, look, we'd rather actually just move on. And so it just feels like, to Adam's point about it, this not quieting down, because I think it's something that Philly is actually, really up for. And so because of that, I think New England would be an insane, match. I think they're willing to pay the price. You guys played the sound of Mike Vrabel talking about, hey, listen, it costs what it costs to go get a great player. And then I think that, the personality of Vrabel, the personality of A.J. Brown, that I think can be, satisfied in terms of Vrabel's leadership. And then it's a need for New England. They need a true number one. Their current starting wide receivers, all three of them, are each averaging less than 3 touchdown receptions a year. They desperately need a true number one.
Tim said it has to be some sort of distraction in order for Philadelphia to move off of such a talented player. A top 3 outside receiver in this league still, even after a down year. But I'd have to be pretty darn distracted to take the 4th biggest dead cap charge in history to not have A.J. Brown on my team in a year where you're trying to win the Super Bowl. We're talking about a guy who was still 10th in the league in target share again last year, even though he's complaining about not getting the ball. I just think the way he creates space over the middle of the field for Devontae Smith, there's so much that he does, whether he's catching the ball or not, that stresses a defense. I'd want him on my team. Yes, a team like Buffalo, if they could trade right now for a time machine, would be a great option. They're not going to be a fit. So where is he going to go that's going to be a better situation? I guess maybe New England if they want to give up those assets. But I generally, if I'm Howie Roseman, I'm going to try to find a way to keep him. He is so good, and you can't get equal value for a guy like that.
It feels like he wants to get out too, though. I mean, you can't look at what happened last year and say, oh, this guy's just happy as a clam there. I mean, Jeremy, that part of it, I get it. An asset like that, you try to hold on to him if you can, but he doesn't want to be there.
Right. Well, Kevin, you mentioned the salary cap issue with trading A.J. Brown. That is a factor because the Eagles, I'm told, want so much in a potential trade. I talked to one team that asked about this, and they said they want a first-round pick and even a second-round pick. Like, we're talking a lot of draft capital for a receiver who's close to 30 years old. Now, maybe they'll soften on that as talks go, but this is sort of a waiting game because teams aren't willing to give up quite that for A.J. Brown, but they still want him, but the Eagles aren't shutting the door completely. So like Adam said, this is not dissipating anytime soon. It was this way at the Combine last week. It seems to have picked up some steam, but if the Eagles are going to not only have a great player, but they're going to have to take a huge dead cap hit on their books, they need draft return for it.
Adam, how about that price that Jeremy's talking about?
Yeah, and that's the delay. There was one team that called the Eagles last weekend, and they said, hey, we'd like to trade for A.J. Brown. What would be the price? And it was at least a 1 and a 2, maybe more. Yeah. And that team said, wow, thank you very much. No thank you. And the team obviously made a decision to move on. And I think that that's the case with A.J. Brown and with Maxx Crosby. Yeah. The Eagles are determined to get their price. The Raiders are determined to get their price. Yep. And neither team, the Eagles nor the Raiders, has been willing to budge until they get close to what they want. Now, as the new league year creeps closer and as we get to the start of the next week. It's always possible that the Eagles and the Raiders could reduce their asking price. But it doesn't sound like that's happened at all to date. And it doesn't sound like it may happen today or tomorrow, and we'll see what transpires over the weekend. Both teams are asking a lot. Both teams have been unwilling to move the players unless they get a lot. But both teams are listening to calls and offers.
Somebody's going to have to get real desperate here over the next couple days. Could happen, okay? Desperation comes out. You never know. Coming up, the Ravens have some big names set to hit free agency way, right? In case you missed it, Aaron Rodgers did an incredible interview with the Pat McAfee Show earlier this week, discussing his future plans of playing in the NFL and with the Steelers.
There hasn't been any progressive conversations. You know, I love Mike, and Mike and I have kept in contact over the years. I've had conversations with Omar. I really, I think Omar, enjoyed having me there. I think the guys, had a positive response, to our time together. But again, there hasn't been any deadline set on me. There hasn't been any contract, floated in front of me for me to well, we're giving you till, March the 8th to make a decision on this contract. There's been nothing to that respect.
I think Brooke and I both watched every minute of this interview. Wide-ranging, very interesting, well done. We welcome in our Steelers reporter, Brooke Pryor. Brooke, what are you hearing about the Steelers' plan at quarterback this coming season?
Well, Laura, what you just heard from me was a deep sigh because despite General Manager Omar Khan saying at the NFL Combine just a week ago that he didn't think it was going to go this year like it went last year with Aaron Rodgers drawing out this decision, that sounded a lot like a guy that we heard just a year ago talking about that there's not a deadline, he's enjoying his free time, he likes spending time with his wife. The Steelers' approach is similar to what it was last year. They're hoping that Rodgers decides he wants to come back for another year. If that doesn't work out, maybe they could draft a quarterback. I would be very surprised if they took one in the first round, although at the NFL Combine, they did have formals with Ty Simpson, Drew Aller, and Carson Beck. So they're doing their homework. They've also got Will Howard, a 6th-round pick from a year ago, on the roster. They really like him. I've talked to people in the building. They really like his smarts, how he is above the neck. Still have to see what he's like below the neck. His arm is great. Footwork still needs some work, but he didn't get a lot of work a year ago because he missed most of the season with that fractured pinky. So Aaron Rodgers is the hope. Beyond that, there's a lot of hoping and praying going on in Pittsburgh.
Interesting. Yeah, you're going to be waiting this whole thing out. And by the way, Rodgers was telling Pat just how much he likes Will Howard. So high endorsement there. We appreciate you, Brooke, for stopping by here. Let's talk about the Ravens a little bit more. They're hoping 2026 can finally be the year they get over that playoff hump. New head coach, Jesse Minter. Still plenty of roster questions to be answered this offseason, from tight end Isaiah Likely to perhaps the top center in free agency. Everybody's talking about 3-time Pro Bowler Tyler Linderbaum. There's a lot of teams that need him, right? Kevin, what should Baltimore be making as its priority here in free agency?
Pass rush, pass rush, pass rush. Okay, obviously.
Good job. Saying that 3 times fast.
They had the 4th lowest pass rush rate in the entire NFL last year. That should never happen in Baltimore. Obviously, they got to replace, if they lose Tyler Linderbaum, a center, but then other than that, it's front 7. Jeremy Fowler reported that maybe they go after a 3rd safety because Jesse Minter likes those kind of looks, but really, they're going to be shopping in the bargain bin. Maybe it's a Khalil Mack. Maybe it's a Calais Campbell, a veteran like that you can get for cheap, but they've got to generate pressure on the quarterback or else it's going to be another mediocre season in Baltimore.
If anybody at home tried to say pass rush 3 times fast, I love you for doing that. All right, new on NFL Live from Adam Schefter. Lions left tackle Taylor Decker, and he requested and will be released by the Detroit Lions. Tim, is this a big loss for an already depleted Detroit O-line?
I do think it's a big loss. Now, obviously, he's been in the league for a decade. He's not, the same exact player that he was earlier in his career. But look, I think that he fit the identity of what, the Lions like to do offensively. And look, if you're going to be a physical, run the ball football team, be aggressive on short yardage situations, you better be good up front with your offensive line. And because of retirement, really, between last year, this year, look, this offensive line looks drastically different. And so remaking it can be difficult. So I think it will have to be a strong effort both in free agency and in the draft to rebuild the offensive line to get the kind of the physicality back that they had when quite frankly, probably the second year that Dan Campbell was in Detroit.
Anytime you go from a strength to a weakness, offensive line in Detroit being so good the past few years, you have an identity problem. There were two stats I saw that should scare every Lions fan, coach, player, and those are they had way less explosive runs last year. That's an offensive line stat. And teams were pressuring Jared Goff much quicker last year than in 2024. That's obviously an offensive line stat. So now to rebuild on the fly with a lot of expensive guys in Detroit, you're going to have to be shopping in the draft and then in the bargain bin in free agency. That's worrying to me, especially in a division with a lot of good teams and a lot of depth.
Here's another couple stats. The Lions were 31st in pass blocking and 20th in run blocking last season, both down from 2024. Got to find some improvement there. That bargain bin, I think I shop in the bargain bin sometimes. You don't want to be doing it in free agency, but you look sharp. All right, still to come. Dallas is in the market for a pass rusher. They don't want to hit the bargain bin. They're the Dallas Cowboys. Kevin explains why Maxx Crosby deserves to play in Jerry World and what it would take to get him there. We'll be right back.
Didn't think we'd be here in this kind of shape. Very disappointing.
It's been a mistake-filled night for the Dallas Cowboys, and the frustration palpable here.
This will be in contention for the worst loss of the year.
Just when we thought it couldn't get worse.
We want to do everything we possibly can to stop somebody.
And the ball is out. And that has been what has really hurt this Cowboys team.
This year was as frustrating as anything. I'm tired and sick of it, but it won't change the way that I lead and me just giving this game everything that I've got.
Cowboys. All right, another challenging season for Dallas as the Super Bowl drought moves past the 30-year mark. Dallas has 2 first-round picks in this year's draft. They have several key free agents on defense, where it was rough last year. Quarterback Dak Prescott spoke earlier this week about his expectations for the Cowboys this upcoming season.
Heck yeah, most definitely, especially what is it said, no projects we need guys now to play. Yeah, no red shirts or whatever. Yeah, I mean, we got a coach in the second year. We know we had some ups and downs and shone some good moments last year, and this is the year that we make a big jump and getting big time players who can help immediately is a key part of that.
Big jump. Dak thinks it's on the way. Kevin, if somebody at home is playing some sort of drinking game where we mentioned Maxx Crosby in the show, they're under the table at this point. But do you think Maxx Crosby is a real possibility for the Cowboys?
Man, I hope nobody's doing that, but maybe it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
If you are.
5 o'clock somewhere. All right. Okay, so
Friday.
Here's the state of play with the Cowboys. Okay, last year they were the second worst team in the NFL at defending the pass when they didn't generate pressure. And guess what? They very rarely generated pressure, partly because they traded away Micah Parsons before the season. I've dunked on the Cowboys way too much for trading Micah Parsons. I'm just going to do it one more time, then we'll retire it, okay? But they've got to find a pass rusher. The Quinnen Williams trade was great. He's one of the best run defenders in football. In fact, Bijan Robinson told me the other day he is the best run defender in football. But you have to generate pressure on the quarterback. That's Maxx Crosby to me. You will erase all of the sins of the Micah Parsons saga if you get Maxx Crosby. That's why I think you Godfather offer the Raiders, and you understand how close you are to real deal contention with that offense.
I do think they're close with the offense. This is presuming that Pickens is, in good, spirits about betting on himself for one more year. The work needs to be done on the defensive side. So, and I think you can say that every level of their defense needs attention. And I think that's what we'll see happen in the draft. I think we'll see some of it in free agency. But yeah, look, when you trade away your edge rusher, then you need to go find one. They haven't done that yet. It's hard to, come by guys that can do that. And so, yes, Maxx Crosby. So if someone is playing that little game, Laura, then they're in trouble. And so
R.I.P. There's another one.
That is certainly, that is certainly, an avenue to explore. Trey Hendrickson, if you're playing the game with his name being mentioned, you're not as in rough shape. But look, he's a guy that I think is going to generate some interest as well. And as I said, I think there'll be a lot of production there. And there are other veteran pass rushers that will be on the market that, look, sometimes it's maybe, kill a mosquito with a sledgehammer a little bit, where you say, yeah, we're going to sign some veteran guys, keep legs fresh, and get bodies in there. So I do think that's how Dallas improves the most.
Yeah, the Cowboys had the 4th most efficient offense last season, but the least efficient defense. Doesn't surprise anybody, but I think that's a good way to put it. All right, time for one more thing before we go. This is fun. Our friend Randy Moss, joining the New Heights podcast, talked about a potential NFL comeback.